right, so many of us woke up to the news this morning of the arrests of former Transnet executives Anuj Singh and Brian Molefe. Former Transnet and Eskom Chief Financial Officer Singh and former Chief Executive Officer Molefe face charges linked to a so-called double invoicing scandal at the state utility in 2015. Now, they appeared in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court in Johannesburg this morning. They were granted 50,000 rand bail. 2 other men appeared with them. Now, they're all expected to be added to the case against former Transnet CEO Siyabonga Gama and 5 others. They were arrested in May this year. Well, for more details, let's bring in eNCA reporters who've been following developments today. Very significant developments indeed. Manqoba Mchunu and Aviwe Mtile. Hello to both of you. Manqoba, let's start with you. This is a hugely significant development because what we know about state capture is that it started at Transnet, so the Zondo report tells us. Talk to me about what happened in court today.
Indeed, Sally. In fact, Transnet is one of the biggest, casualties of state capture, given that 72% of the corruption that went on in state-owned enterprises was actually at Transnet at the time. So what went on in court, Sally, is that those suspects, of course, which included the former CEO, Brian Molefe, as well as former CFO, Anuj Singh, did make an appearance in court today. You recall, Sally, that they had handed themselves over to police this morning. So they did apply for bail at that particular court, which is a specialized crimes court, which was sitting in Palm Ridge, and they have been granted bail of over 50,000 rand. But Sally, this is about the corruption case involving the acquisition of locomotives that was done back in 2015. And what we do understand at this particular point is that as far as their involvement is concerned, they were involved in 2 transactions that had taken place at Transnet, where they had paid an amount of over 300 million rand to 2 Gupta-linked companies, which is Regiments as well as Trillion. And these companies were paid those amounts simply for providing advice to Transnet and also securing a loan of over 3 billion rand to to get those trains, rather, Sally. But we do understand, of course, that what happened in that particular case is that this money was paid even before those trains were acquired. So this was merely money that was paid for advice that was provided to Transnet at that particular point. So they are facing various charges, which include, of course, the contravention of the Public Management Finance Act, as well as fraud and money laundering. And of course, today they had made an application for bail. And Sally, take a listen to what those charges in particular have to do with.
So the charges for the former exec are the breach or contravention of the Public Finance Management Act as well as fraud, and then the other directors of regiments are fraud as well as corruption. But what we must also state is that this emanates from about various transaction advisory services that took place around the contracting or getting on board the 1064 locomotive deal. That was highly controversial. At the time, there were talks of that particular contract could have escalated to about 54 billion through testimony that you also heard at the Zondo Commission. However, this particular arrest is premised or focused on the advisory services so provided by the various companies to Transnet that eventually also resulted in the getting of the club loan and various transactions that led to the 1064 locomotive deal transaction.
So in terms of piecing this all together, we've seen 4 arrests today. There were 6 arrests in May. That's 10 people linked to the suspected corrupt activity at Transnet. Is the NPA going to be making more arrests in connection with this particular case?
Indeed, Sally, at this particular point, the NPA not ruling out a further arrest in this matter. We do know at this particular point that there are about 13 accused that appear on that indictment. And of course, they're saying that at this particular point, they're still going to arrest further people. But at this point, all indications are that those, suspects that might be arrested include the 2 Gupta brothers, who we know at this particular point are still out of the country. They've not been arrested just yet, even though they were claims, of course, that they had been arrested earlier on. But we do understand that, they will also be facing those charges because they've been linked to some of the crimes that happened at Transnet. In fact, we do understand that they had benefited to the tune of about 6 billion rand. And this is from the State Capture Commission that had revealed that they had benefited over 6 billion rand just from this tender that had taken place at Transnet. But of course, Sally, we did see the other 6 accused, who include the former CEO Siyabonga Gama, also appearing in court. Their matter has now been remanded to the 14th of October, and this is to allow for the state to actually, give the docket to the defense, and also for more arrests to happen in this particular matter. But definitely the state not ruling out the possibility that more people could be arrested. But take a listen to what Sindisiwe Sibuga from the NPA's investigating directorate had to say.
We have committed as the NPA to about enrolling seminal matters within the next 6 months. We are 3 months in, 3 months to go, so more high-profile arrests can be expected.
All right, so Manqoba, very strong chance of more arrests. Aviwe, let's bring you in now, because you're going to take us back to what the NPA believes was going on. This issue of double invoicing, and then also the procurement of these locomotives. Just take us back to where it all started, and bring us the full picture of what the corruption is alleged to have looked like.
Well, so today, Sally, they appeared for Transnet-related fraud and corruption amounting to 398.4 million rand. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Experts will tell you that, in fact, there's way more money that has been siphoned out and looted from Transnet. The state capture report itself will tell you that these were the architects of state capture at Transnet, mentioning Siyabonga Gama, the former boss, mentioning Brian Molefe, the former CEO, as well as Anoj Singh, the former CFO. They are the enablers and did the Gupta bids in those billions that were looted out from Transnet. We do understand, Sally, that there was that controversial locomotive deal to the Chinese company for 1,064 locomotives, bloated by 16 billion rand, amounting at 54 billion rand eventually. There were Gupta kickbacks to the amount of 9 billion rand that we were aware of, and also those inflated prices to the likes of your regiments, some of those that we now come to know from the state capture report. But in fact, the organization undoing tax abuse, an organization that's really been on the tails of these Gupta networks and state capture, and also helping out the NPA since 2017, details a bit more some of these transactions that we have now come to know of. Let's take a listen to Advocate Stephanie Fick from our town.
I think the main problem was this whole China Development Bank loan for the 1064 locomotives that Transnet planned on getting from China, but also then requesting the funding. So it started way in the beginning, 2014, where there were dealings, but the Treasury of Transnet realized that firstly the deal was going to be too expensive for us. They're not following PFMA regulations. And then, all of a sudden regiments was part of this deal. So the deal sort of went quiet. And then we know that our former president visited China with a few delegates. And just after that, and just before Brian Molefe was removed from Transnet, they all of a sudden signed the same MOU, in other words, the same deal that's going to cost South Africa an enormous amount of money. And it all of a sudden included this, money to be paid to regiments for arranging this whole deal. A whole 189 million rand went to regiments for doing what? So this, again, it just shows you how people were put in positions. Anoj Singh, who made misrepresentations to the board, people that were placed in positions to make sure that this types of deals go through. And I don't think we will ever know how much money that actually cost.
So, Aviwe, of course, arrests are significant because we know there has to be a prima facie case. There has to be a fairly strong-looking case on the surface of it before the trial gets underway, before you can actually charge and arrest someone. Talk to me about what the experts are saying in terms of their confidence regarding successful prosecution. We heard so much information from the Zondo Commission, but of course it has to go further than that, doesn't it?
Got so much information, Sally. In fact, we've seen a number of high-profile arrests over the recent years, Sally, but the reality is we're not seeing those amount to successful prosecutions. Hence, a lot of South Africans are becoming disheartened. But the experts will tell you, Sally, that we should brace ourselves for long drawn out court proceedings, as of course they are innocent until they are proven guilty, for example. So they say we must brace ourselves for those court proceedings that could be lengthy in their nature. But also, these are just one charges, for example, this Transnet matter to former CEOs and CFOs of even Eskom. So the rot that happened at Eskom itself is still yet to be unearthed, and we could see possible more cases that also could be drawn out. That's a conversation, in fact, that we had earlier on with Corruption Watch. Let's take a listen to that.
We do have the presumption of innocence, and it's a criminal case, so they're going to need to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And we know that criminally accused have abused court processes in the past to try to draw these cases out. So, you know, the NPA really has to show their mettle now. They don't have because the NPA itself was captured, you know, we don't have a track record over the last 10, 15 years of these types of complicated cases with multiple accused going quickly. We had the VBS case, but in the VBS case, we had a key accused who turned state witness, which I think helped facilitate that matter being expedited. So perhaps you're right, Dan, perhaps we have to brace ourselves, but let's now give the NPA all the support they require, and hopefully they can drive this first set of charges successfully without too much delay.
Yeah, a very significant development today, but a long road ahead. Mangoba, I want to bring you in for a final question because you were in court today. Those images of Brian Molefe were fascinating for me, and I'm just wondering, how did he come across in court? Because this is a man who, when he was employed at Eskom, he was seen as a bit of a champion, someone who could really sort out Eskom. He had a great reputation at that stage. This is a man who broke down in tears at the State Capture Commission. Talk to me about how he came across today in court.
Well, Sally, it was very hard to read Brian Molefe today because most of the time, I mean, he kept a stony face. He really didn't show any emotion in court. You know, he didn't seem to sort of appreciate what was happening in court. As far as emotions are concerned, he didn't look worried and he didn't look relieved as well in court. So it was very hard to read where he was. But we do know, Sally, that, of course, he's facing quite serious charges that he has to answer to. And, of course, how the state will take this matter forward is really important in this matter, given that we know that there are quite a number of cases that have not been prosecuted in this particular matter. But of course, we do expect to hear how strong their case is when this matter does return to court on the 14th of October.
Well, thank you so much to both of you, Mangoba Mchunu and also Aviu Mtila, just giving us a really strong picture of the significance of today's arrest. Thanks to both of you.